Well, I'm going to continue my series through Exodus. And in this season, we're going to have some stops and starts, okay? So we'll have to do our best to try to remember where we are. Like last week, we had the International Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church. So I didn't do a message on Exodus. Next week's Thanksgiving. I'm going to do a special message on that as we do a joint service. It's going to be about giving thanks, just in case you're wondering what that's about. So I need to remind you guys and fill in the gaps a little bit because there's no way you're going to remember anything I preached 2 weeks ago, let alone just last week, all right? So, and I won't even remember myself. So let me backtrack a little bit of where we've been most recently. 3 Sundays ago, we looked at 3 stories of grumbling from the end of Exodus 15 to the beginning of Exodus 17. And that's when we started our gratitude journal. And for those of you who are doing it, just got a week left, week and a half left, because we timed it where it's exactly a month from when we started that to Thanksgiving Day. And if you didn't start yet, even now, start that. It's been a great practice for my family, the 4 of us, just to do a few minutes of gratitude journal before we head off to sleep. And if we ever forget, they'll be the one. Actually, Kelly will be the one that says, oh, we forgot to do the gratitude journal. And so we'll pull it out and do it together. And it's so good, especially after the boys have fought. All right? It's really good to do it after that. Then you're reminded of the things that we are grateful for. So I would encourage you to keep doing that. And I hope that starts a habit. They say a habit starts after 30 days of doing the same thing over and over again. I hope that starts a habit for you guys, that you continue that. Well, that was 3 Sundays ago. 2 Sundays ago, it was a joint worship on Halloween. You probably remember nothing about that message except costumes, all right, which is fine. And I actually thought, should I wear the Moses costume the whole duration of this rest of the series? It would be comfortable for me to wear sandals, okay? But in any case, we did that, and we focused on the 10 Commandments of Exodus 20. So I have to backtrack a little bit because I went from the beginning of chapter 17 to 20, and in between, there are a couple of really important stories about Moses' journey, specifically his leadership journey, which we'll see was not an easy journey, thus the title, The Burden of Leadership. And I think this will resonate, certainly did for me, and for anyone that's in any leadership position, I think will resonate with you as well. Exodus 17, the Israelites are camped now at Rephidim. The first 7 verses of chapter 17 is about them grumbling about water, which God graciously provides for them. And after this, there's 2 consecutive stories, the rest of chapter 17 and then chapter 18, that initially may not seem related, but track with me, okay? And see that it does relate, especially when we think about, again, Moses' leadership journey, which is one of the big things that I'm doing during this series, right? Not just the Israelites' journey, but to become the people of God, but Moses' journey as he grows in his friendship with God. All right? Everyone understand where I'm going? All right. Exodus 17:8. Let's turn there. Exodus 17:8. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Now, these are actually very significant verses because it introduces us to 2 new things in this narrative. One is the first time we meet Joshua. Joshua, of course, will be the one that ends up taking the leadership mantle from Moses, and this is our first introduction to him. It's almost as if the way he's introduced that they knew about him pretty much. Like the Israelites knew the kind of man Joshua was, a young man that he was already. But he's introduced for the first time. That's not going to be our focus today. I actually did a whole sermon on Joshua about a year ago in that series, Divine Mentors, which you can look up and see online. But secondly, we're introduced to the first enemy of Israel outside of Egypt, Amalek. Does that ring a bell to anyone, Amalek? Amalek was a grandson of Esau. So these people, the Israelites and the Amalekites, are distant cousins. They live to the north of where the Israelites were traveling, Rephidim. And according to Deuteronomy 25, they attacked Israel from the back of the line without warning, cutting off the most vulnerable first. And God tells the Israelites to wipe them off. Okay? And you can find that in Deuteronomy 25. So, Joshua is fighting on the battlefield, but there's something that Moses is doing, which will be our focus. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. Whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they, referring to Aaron and Hur, took a stone, put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Any of you guys punish your kids, have them raise their hands? Yeah, that is a cruel punishment, guys. All right? Even I don't do that to my boys, okay? Because that is painful, and if you, especially have them hold something, right? And so it's painful at any age, but at 80 years old, Moses, but every time he does this, and he realizes the battle is somewhat dependent on him. And the result with Aaron and Hur holding him up is that Joshua overwhelms the Amalek and his people, and Israel gains a great victory. Moses builds an altar and calls it Yahweh Nisi. The Lord is my banner. Yes, the Lord is the supreme victor. Yes, Joshua prevailed on the field of battle, but they almost lost because Moses got tired. His hands grew weary. The Hebrew word for a weary that I capitalize here is kaved. It's going to be an important word because we're going to see the thread of this word in three stories, beginning with this. That word kaved could also be translated heavy or severe. It's already been used in Exodus in reference to some of the plagues, like the severe kaved plague that kills the livestock, or the heavy hail, kaved hail, that falls on the Egyptians. Here, it's used to describe the heavy weight on Moses, but not just literally on his arms, but figuratively on his life. See, the leadership mantle that he's been carrying thus far has been heavy and wearisome. And as his hands begin to drop, Joshua begins to lose. Aaron and Hur quickly comes to Moses' aid, holds up his hand, and they prevail. Kaved. We'll see this word again in the very next story. Chapter 18, Moses has a happy reunion with his family, including his father-in-law, Jethro. The priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses, for Israel and his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. That Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her home, along with her two sons. The name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I've been a sojourner in a foreign land. That was probably a honeymoon baby. And the name of the other, Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. If you remember, Zipporah initially comes with Moses to Egypt. At some point, Moses sends her back. So this must have been a very, very happy reunion. Right? The father-in-law, his wife, his two boys, they're enjoying. He's telling them all the things that God had done. Well, the next day, Moses goes back to work. He can't take a long vacation, okay? He goes back to work, and the next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me and I decide between one person and the other. I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. Not the teaching part, not the judging part, not that part, but how he's going about this. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. The thing is too coveted for you. You are not able to do it alone. There's that word again. It's too heavy. And Jethro, just seeing it for one day, he knows immediately this is not good, this is not sustainable. So he gives them some advice, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Moses listens and implements the advice, and some of that kaved burden, heavy burden, is lifted, but not fully. There's still a big burden on his leadership calling. The next time we see this word kaved in reference to Moses is in Numbers 11. So we'll jump there. In Numbers 11, the Israelites are at it again. They're grumbling. They're grumbling about how hard it's been. They're grumbling about food again. And this time, it has deadly consequences. And then we read in Numbers 11:10, Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servants?" When we talked about the grumbling, and here's Moses grumbling as well, how that distorts reality as part of the consequences. Why have you dealt ill with your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight? Why have you not been gracious to me, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Like, I'm tired of this. Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? That you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers? I mean, he is upset. Where am I going to get meat to give to all these people? For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. I am not able to carry all these people alone. The burden is too kaved for me. There's that word again. It's too heavy for me. I don't want this burden. In Exodus 17, Aaron and Hur notices the burden of lifting his hands in battle is too heavy. In Exodus 18, Jethro notices the burden of judging and leading too heavy. Here, Moses himself says, carrying these people, the burden of that is too heavy. Can't do it anymore. And the mental, emotional, spiritual burden gets to a point where he says in the next verse, if you will treat me like this, kill me at once. If I found favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. In the NIV is translated, that I may not see my own ruin. Basically what he's saying is, kill me, God, or they will. So be gracious to me, Lord. Have favor on me. And get me out of this. I can't do it anymore. That will be grace, God, to take me out now. I've done my best. I've tried my hardest. I can't do it anymore. I want you to see the agony that Moses is going through. And God is gracious to him, but not by taking his life. It's not his time yet. Instead, God provides for him. And we'll take a look at that here in a few minutes as well. But for now, I want to pause and just reflect on these three stories because we get a glimpse of the heavy, wearisome burden of leadership that was Moses' calling that he had to carry. Now, some may see Moses' experiences and envy him. Oh, I would love to meet God in the burning bush. What are you complaining about? Oh, I would love to walk through the Red Sea dry. What are you complaining about? Oh, man, I wish I could see the glory of God on Mount Sinai. Oh, I wish I could see God face to face and talk with him like a friend. Incredible privileges of his calling, for sure. But there is another side to leadership, especially spiritual leadership. And he struggled under the weight and the burden of leadership to the point that he wanted to die, that he thought that would be God's grace on him. Anyone who leads anything, you know that the leadership burden is real. But can you imagine the crushing weight of leading a nation out of slavery, a new nation that are becoming the people of God? And it's not just Moses. So many of the great leaders in the Bible struggled with this burden. David and Paul and Jeremiah and Elijah, to name just a few. Elijah, in fact, does say, like Moses, God, kill me. Take my life. I'm done. And again, if you're leading anything, a business, a team at work, your family, that's a heavy burden. All the more so if that includes spiritual leadership. To be honest, I actually was thinking of not backtracking to these stories and just keep going in Exodus. Because in talking about this, it gets personal. And I did not want the application of these passages to focus on me as a spiritual leader and pastor. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to take this occasion to give a few minutes of understanding of what pastors have gone through, especially in this season. I think it's good for us to know. You speak as a pastor that the leadership burden of ministry is real and it's heavy. Yes, there are great joys. I consider it a great joy to be called into this ministry, to serve this church, but it is also heavy. In May, there's an article in the AP News with this title: "For some pastors, the past year was too much to bear." It's a long title, okay? And it will probably pique no one's interest except pastors, so it piqued my interest. For some pastors, the past year was too much to bear. It begins with a story of a 46-year-old pastor, I'm 46, who had been in ministry for 21 years. I've been in ministry for 21 years. And he decided to leave his ministry, but not just his ministry, but ministry period. And he says, it's been such a relief. He said, I'm still going to church, but I don't have to do anything at a church for the first time in 21 years. I don't have to worry about who isn't there or why or who will be mad at me next. I don't have to have regrets all afternoon, evening about how I messed up my sermon. The article talks about, only Lydia laughs because she knows. The article talks about how on top of the usual burdens of ministry, all that's going on in this season, politically, racially, socially, COVID-wise, has been the final straw for many pastors. It cites a Barna study done earlier this year where it said 30% of pastors have had, quote, real and serious thought about quitting full-time ministry within the past year. Anecdotally, I know of a number of pastors that have quit during the season. Actually, I shouldn't say the word quit, okay? That have said this is too much to bear. Just before COVID, there was a string of pastor suicides that were being reported in the media because some of them were very prominent names. One of whom was actually a speaker at a church planting conference that I went to before we started this church. Leaves behind 4 young kids. I was so inspired by his passion for the gospel. At that conference, I think his church was about 200, 300, 400 people. And before his suicide, it was well over 1,000. God was using this ministry to reach many, many people with the gospel of Christ. And then he took his own life. In one of the articles that I was reading, it mentions a study by the Schaeffer Institute where it says 70% of pastors constantly fight depression. 71% say they're burnt out. 80% says ministry has really negatively affected their family life. Leadership is a heavy burden. Spiritual leadership is a heavy burden. Just before I left for sabbatical, someone gave me a big hug and said, just make sure you come back. And the thought, should I come back or not, by God's grace, was not something that I thought about during sabbatical. I know some pastors that do. And not because I have more faith in other pastors, but I think a lot of it is because I felt like I had such support and such love and grace from our people during this season. I am filled with gratitude for the ways that you have stuck together and stuck with me in this season. 3 churches that we visited, Lydia and I, during the sabbatical, 3 pastors of those churches each referenced how hard this season has been. One pastor did it in a very humorous way. It was so funny the way he did it. Basically saying, I'm a pastor. I'm not a medical expert. Stop expecting me to know everything about everything. But there's one pastor that my heart just went out to. He's ready to preach. It's the second service, is the one that we went to because we slept in a little bit. 11 o'clock service. He comes up. He doesn't say a single word. I could already tell there's something heavy. Maybe it's a very heavy sermon. And he says, you know, someone just came up to me right after the first service and whispered in my ear. This is when the mandate of masks just came back in August. Someone just whispered to me and said, I hope, Pastor, you finally grow a spine. That was his intro to his sermon. Man, I was so mad for him. I was so mad that I remember there, especially as he's about to go to the pulpit again, say, I hope you grow a spine. I know that's just a tip of the iceberg of what many in ministry have had to endure in this season. And again, I am so grateful in light of these things, of the way that you have supported and prayed for and loved and stayed together in this season. But it would be a lie to say that thought of leaving ministry has never entered my mind in my 20 years of ministry. I don't think any pastor, no matter how strong their conviction of their calling is, could say that through the duration of my ministry, I never thought about that. It's not just because of potential conflicts and divides. Even when there isn't conflicts and divides, sometimes just the burden feels too coveted. It's heavy. It's wearisome. And when pastors like you guys are not deeply connected with God, that makes the burden even more heavy because it feels like you're carrying it. Again, does that mean that I or other pastors who may have thought about leaving ministry did not have enough faith? Did Moses not have enough faith when he said God killed him? Did Elijah not have enough faith? No, it just simply means that leadership is coveted. And I love that God does not rebuke Moses or Elijah after they say, Lord, take my life. Instead, God gives Elijah a good nap and some good food. And then he says, take another nap and here's some more good food. And for Moses, he provides him 70 spirit-filled elders who would carry the burden with him. I mean, these are two of the greatest leaders this world has ever known, and yet they struggled. And, in our Bible reading plan, we're reading through Matthew right now. Matthew 17, earlier this week, was about transfiguration. Moses and Elijah with Jesus. These two leaders who both said, take my life, please. And they're there transfigured with Jesus in their glory. So these stories are affirming to me. And I hope they're affirming to you. Again, if you ever felt the burden of leading anything, anyone, of serving, of providing for others, you're in good company. Just this week, I was meeting with a member of our church who recently got into a new position in which he's overseeing 70 people. And you could tell the exhaustion on his face. I was meeting him in between, thinking that it was the end of his workday. We had to go back to work after our meeting. You felt it. Anyone who leads anything, you know. Having said that, the real problem for Moses was not that the burden was heavy. That's just the nature of the beast. The real problem was that he was trying to carry this burden on his own. Exodus 18. Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. This was Moses' mistake. Jethro could see it from a million miles away. You're going to crash and burn. You can't do it alone. But notice, he's not just concerned about Moses. He says, you and the people with you. Not just you, but your people is going to suffer as well because you're trying to do it on your own. What you're doing is not good for you. It's not good for your people. What Jethro says here echoes what God told Adam in Genesis 2. It is not good to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone. It applies to any human relationships, in family, in friendships, and certainly in leadership as well. We were created to be in community, in relationship, sharing and carrying each other's burdens. Of course, I'm not talking about the times we need to be alone, right? For reflection and prayer. And if you're an introvert, you get energized that way. But in life, in relationships and leading, it is not good to do it alone. This is not among Christians only, right? According to an international business survey, nearly 70% of first-time CEOs said that loneliness has negatively impacted their capacity to lead. In another study, over 50% of CEOs report feeling alone most of the time. And you've heard the phrase, it's lonely at the top. It's a lot of truth to that. And again, if you've ever been in leadership positions, which many of our people have, you've felt that, I'm sure, as well. The loneliness of leadership. So if that's a real problem, what is the solution? What does God do for Moses? How does God provide? In short, God provides people. God doesn't take away the burden. God provides companions to share that burden. Let's go back to these stories and think about who specifically God provided, okay? Beginning with Aaron and Hur. And as we go through this list, right, on these three stories, think about one. Do you need these people in your life? Do you need such companions on your leadership journey? And then two, can you be this to someone else on their leadership journey? Can you be this person to someone else? First, you got Aaron and Hur, supporters, intercessors, right? God provides Aaron and Hur. Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone, put it under him, sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on the other side, the other on the other sides, so his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. We all need somebody to just come alongside us, and without saying a word, just hold us. Just support us. Just hold on. Just be somebody that we could lean on, especially when things get too difficult and too heavy. Do you have that? Can you be that to somebody? Somebody in leadership positions, somebody in your family, somebody in your community that you just are willing to just stand with them and support them. This also is a great picture of intercession. What do you think Moses was doing all that time, lifting his hands with his staff? Well, if you read until from the Exodus 1 till now, every time he's doing this, he's praying. He's crying out to God. So Moses is interceding in prayer, and it was getting weary. And so Aaron and Hur, what are they doing as they're doing this? I bet they're praying. They're praying for Joshua. They're praying for Moses. They're interceding. Aaron and Hur is a great picture of not just someone who supports, someone we can lean on, but someone who's willing to stand in the gap and intercede on our behalf. Recently, somebody in ministry asked Lydia if she would be part of an intercessory team that meets once a month from different places. They don't know each other, only their desire to support this person in ministry. So they meet once a month, and for an hour they pray together for this brother in ministry. And I thought, what a great privilege and honor that would be. And we need more intercessors. Our ministry needs more intercessors. Our ministry needs more people willing to just hold up the hands of our leaders. And I'm thankful for those who are doing that role. And I know that for some reason, I've always been hesitant to ask more people, can you pray for me? And this is a convicting word that, who do I think I am? Am I better than Moses? Not by a long shot. I need some Aaron and Hurs. I need more Aaron and Hurs in my life to just support and to intercede. Our ministry needs that. Our leaders need that. Secondly, God provides Jethro, mentors and complementary leaders. In Exodus 18, at just the right time, God provides Jethro. He immediately diagnoses the problem. He knows what the solution is as well. He's the first executive pastor, okay? The first executive pastor, and he's a good one. He says, now obey my voice. That he's using his father-in-law card, okay? Now obey my voice. I will give you advice. God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. You shall warn them about the statutes and the laws. Make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. So continue that. The teaching, the preaching, the teaching them about what they need to do and how they need to do it. Continue to do that. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy, hate a bribe. Place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide for themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. Jethro plays two roles for Moses here. One, he's a mentor to him. A mentor is someone who loves you and knows you well enough, who's gone a few more steps on their life journey than you have, and realize when you are not doing what you should be doing. And they love you enough to call you out and say, that is not good. That is not sustainable. You have to make some changes. We all need someone who knows us well enough, who can speak truth in love to us in that way. Someone that we trust spiritually enough, who we know has our best interests. Husbands, wives, if you are been praying and hoping that your husband or wife will make some changes, it's obvious that something that they're doing is not good, here's my advice to you. Instead of you talking to them, find someone that they could respect and trust and ask them to be their mentor. Ask them to talk to them. Ideally, they'll listen to you, but maybe they won't in that moment. They're too prideful. But is there somebody that they would listen to, that they trust enough and say, I'm willing to hear you out? And say, what you're doing is not good. It's not good. It's not sustainable. It's not good for your marriage. It's not good for your work. It's not good for your relationships. It's not good for your family. It's not good. We all need that because we all have blind spots. I remember in seminary, me and a friend of mine, we were so eager to have mentors that we would ask different professors that we liked. And I think I asked two, and they both said no. And I was like, oh, what? My friend was not deterred, so he kept asking. And every one of them that he asked said no. They were like, what are we doing here, okay? It was very, very discouraging. And actually, for a number of years, I did not ask another person for that kind of relationship. During this church planting journey, one of the things that they assigned me was a coach, and he was the one I already knew that they assigned me. And I remember just meeting with him at least once a month, sometimes even more. And what a blessing that was for him to speak into my life, to speak into our ministry. A lot of things that we did in the very beginning was in conversation with this mentor, this coach that I had. We all need that. Over the years, I've had the privilege of meeting with certain brothers that have asked specifically, can we meet together? I would love for you to mentor me. That I've met with on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, monthly basis. I've never said no. Because of my experience, I've never said no to anyone that said, can I meet with you on a regular basis to talk, to pray? I still consider it one of our privileges when someone does. Would anyone here, if someone said, hey, I would love to, I know you're busy, but I would love to learn from you, anyone here would say no to that? What a privilege that is. And it is something, mentorship, that our church does not yet have a culture of, but we need it. We need it. We do need to create a culture of mentorship where older ones are willing to take on younger ones in marriage, in life, in work, in their walk with God, and say, hey, I don't know much more than you, but I've gone a few more steps ahead. I'll take you, meet with you, pray with you, speak into your life. We need it. We need people to be mentored, and we need people that would be mentoring. The second role that he plays, Jethro, is someone who complements Moses' leadership. Like he immediately sees what Moses did not see. And I wonder, did Moses ever think about this seemingly simple idea? Hey, share the leadership. Hey, do it this way. And maybe Moses, he did think about it, but didn't want to burden other people. Or maybe he did think about it, but he didn't know how to go about developing such a culture. Or maybe he didn't trust others. Or maybe it never occurred to him to do it this way. And at this point, with all those reasons, I am projecting onto Moses, because this is me, okay? I resonate with all those reasons. I don't want to burden other people, right? I don't know how to do it. I feel like, that seems so difficult. Maybe there's trust issues, right? Maybe the thought never occurred to me. And I love that, especially in our leadership teams, there have been some great leaders that have, hey, have you thought about it this way? I never saw it that way. We all need people that can help complement our giftings and our abilities. And Jethro does that in such an amazing way. I actually think, I've been sharing this with our leadership teams, that I think our next hire, when we're ready for our next hire to our staff, probably should be an executive pastor that could complement me well. Because I do see 7, 8 years in, I do see the holes in my ministry abilities. And I bet these holes are not foreign to you guys. I bet you've seen it much more than I did. And so Jethro plays this important role of being a mentor and complementing Moses' leadership. Lastly, it's judges and elders, fellow ministers and servants. So after Moses says, "Kill me, please," this is just God's response. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them." So they're already elders. They're already been qualified that way. But 70 of them, even more so, bring them to the tent of meeting and let them take their stand here with you. And I will come down and talk with you there. I will take some of the spirit that is on you. That word spirit can be translated small s, just a human spirit. But ESV, NIV, they translate it capital S. They see it in context. I agree with them. That is the Holy Spirit that is in you, and I'll put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it alone, yourself alone. God provides them 70 others that could share the burden with them. There are that many. And God says, here's what they need, though, the Holy Spirit, because I want you to have people alongside you that have the same heart, same mind, and same spirits. So important. Even in marriage, right? If you don't have the same heart, mind, spirit, you guys are going different ways, and that's difficult. And God provides leaders with the same heart, mind, spirit to go together in serving and leading these people. In Exodus 18, Jethro, right? He says, these are what you should look for. Look for able men from all people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy, hate a bribe. So you want people of character. Spirit-filled, people of character, and ability. Look for able men, competent men. And depending on their competency, put them at chiefs over thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. Think about this qualification just in Exodus and Numbers. Spirit-filled, people of character, godly character, people of competence, ability. That's the New Testament qualifications. 1 Timothy, Titus, elders, deacons, that's what you see. And I do thank God so much. It's a good time for me to pause and just thank those who have so faithfully served over all these years on all of our leadership teams, from first board that we have till now. Our deacons team for the last 3 years that have been serving, right? Our staff over the years, our servants on each of our teams. So thankful that God has always provided what we needed, who we needed, when we needed it. But I think for our church to take the next step in growth, we're going to need to amp this up. We're going to need somehow to find ways to develop and train people who are spirit-filled, godly men and women with the ability to fill in the holes of all these leadership roles that we have. Not only so that we can share the burden together and so no one is burnt out, but so we can share the burden of the mission together, ultimately. Like the goal is not, at the end of our ministry, hopefully no one will burn out. That's not our goal. Our goal is that the mission of the church, of loving God, of loving others, of making disciples of all nations is fulfilled. But it can only be fulfilled when the people that God's called has the capacity and the ability and the strength to endure and keep going. Which leads to my absolute final point, all right? Like, what was the result of the fruit of sharing this burden together? If you do this, Jethro says, God will direct you. You'll be able to endure, and all these people also will go to their place in peace. Remember, he said, it's not good for you, Moses, and it's not good for the people. But if you do this, and you share this burden with godly men and women and people of character, then you'll be able to endure. You, Moses, can endure, and the people, they'll have shalom. Shalom. They'll have peace. They'll have health, well-being for their souls. In Exodus 17, he says, so his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. That word steady can be translated faithful. Moses, you can be steady. You can have faithfulness. You can endure till the end if you have these people sharing it with you. And the final thing, endurance, peace, and health for the people, steadiness, faithfulness. is victory. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, the Lord is my banner. Saying, a hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Yahweh Nisi. The word Nisi means standard or a signal. It's a signal of victory for all to see, which is a great comfort for any leader in any ministry capacity, because the ultimate victory, thank God, does not depend on a pastor, on a missionary, on a person. It does not depend ultimately whether a pastor leaves or stays in a ministry. It does not depend on me or you. Even though God calls and uses people, that's his heart and desire, it ultimately does not depend on people, but on God. And the church and the kingdom of God is much bigger, much stronger, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Amen? Because ultimately, Jesus is its leader. I tell you, that brings so much comfort. I do hope our church exists until Jesus returns. The chances of that, unless he returns soon, probably not. Even the greatest churches have come and gone. But the church of Jesus Christ, the big C, universal, invisible, will stand strong. His mission will be accomplished. That word for banner, Nisi, comes out in a prophecy about Jesus in Isaiah. In that day, the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Jesus is our greatest leader. He carried the burden of leadership that no one else could. He had to do it alone. No one could come next to him, not even his own father. He had no choice but to carry the burden of the world, of the cross, of our sins by himself. And he carried us into the kingdom of God in doing so. He is our leader. He is our intercessor. He is our mentor. He is our shalom, peace. He is our victor. And he will lead us to victory. That, in the end, gives all the leaders in ministry or elsewhere the strength to continue and to endure. Close your eyes with me.